All right. Hey, I got a question for you all. Can you remember far enough back the horror or the trauma that you experienced when you're in your school seating area, maybe for the first time, your school eating area, and you had to find a place to sit? Like maybe it was your first day at that school or you had just moved there. If you can remember, for us in Canada, we'd call it the cafeteria. Here, it's just your eating area where you're trying to find where is a seat available for me to sit. Like, I'm just thinking about it, like I'm feeling those memories come back and those experiences come back. And I've talked to people about this, and it's amazing the number of people who have just had that common emotion, like being able to remember that feeling within their hearts about like the awkwardness and the fear of rejection that came in place. Because what we're trying to do when we're at a school and we're looking for a place to sit and you're looking in the cafeteria is you're trying to find who are my people, right? You're trying to experience who are the people that are like me, but more than that, who are the people that like me? Like, where am I going to find those type of people? And what you don't want to hear is you don't want to hear what Forrest Gump experienced when he was on the bus. You don't want to hear seats taken, right? You don't want to hear that. You want to hear your Jenny, I think her name was in Forrest Gump, to say, you can sit with me. In fact, a couple of years, it was last year, I was in Atlanta, and I had just flown in, and we had to take a bus from the airport, I think, to, where the terminal was to the airport. And I stood out, I'm not going to lie. I stood out in this bus. Like, I was like one of the last people on the bus, and it was very different culture than what I'm experiencing, and people would know just by looking at me that I am like foreign, like I am not from here. And all the seats, there were seats available, but all the seats were taken. Like everybody was on the inside of the seat, they weren't sitting on the window, and they were just sprawled out, and the bus lady, in her most American accent, yelled, "Hey, sit down back there." And I was like, I'm trying, no one's letting me sit down. And then I heard this beautiful voice, this Jenny, I'm just going to call her Jenny, said, "You can sit with me." And I was like, oh, thank you. Like I found somebody that isn't just rejecting me and isn't not moving over. Because, I mean, that is a really horrible feeling when you're trying to find your people, when you're trying to find people that will move and make room for you. It takes a lot of courage to go and ask to sit at someone's table. And do you remember this in school? There's sort of like an order to the room, like there's an order to the eating area. You had your band geeks, you had your jocks. Do you guys, I don't know if you call them jocks here, but you had your like sport people, you had your chess people, you had your math people, like you had your, I don't know, just your stoner people. And looking at some of you, maybe you were in that. I'm just kidding. We all had like these different types of people that were sort of trying to, like there's this order, and you knew. There was the religious table, right? The religious table is the funniest table because it's like a guy asks a girl out and she says, "The Holy Spirit is telling me no." And it's like, look, I can take no from you, but the creator of the heavens and the earth rejecting me, I don't know if that's really what's going on here. But we're looking for our types of people, and we're looking for a seat at a table. Because you know this, we surround ourselves with people who like us, right? That's just natural. We surround ourselves with people. More than that, we surround ourselves with people who are like us. So we surround ourselves with people that like us, but we also surround ourselves with people that look like us, that talk like us, that believe what we believe, that vote for who we vote for, that dress like us, that have the same ideologies as us, oftentimes that have the same skin color as us. We surround ourselves with people who like us, and we surround ourselves with people who are like us. And Christians historically are like the worst at this. or if one way you put it, the best at this, but like at creating these subcultures, these subgroups, these, I am going to be in my clique, I am going to surround myself with people that believe what I believe, even within the same denomination within Christianity, and we surround ourselves with those same types of people, and we sort of ostracize and make everyone else outcasts. We don't expand our circles. We create these cliques, and we create the table that is only for people that like us and that are like us. And this is challenging for me. I'm not naturally somebody that is going to go out of my way and expand. Like, it's not my natural instinct to expand my table, to invite people to sit at my table. Some of you, this is like your bread and butter. Like, you just, anybody that you can find and anybody that you can get in contact with, you're going to invite them to sit at your table. But for others of us, this is really challenging, that we save the space at our table for people that like us and that are like us. And the problem with that is Jesus wasn't like that. And I don't think Jesus would like that. If you follow Jesus through the Gospels, Jesus didn't reserve the seats at his table for people that were just like him, or that for people that like acted like him or that liked him. Jesus wasn't like that. And was this just a first century thing? Was this just like, where there was this religious sector where everybody else was not welcome? Right? Was this just like a religion where people that were Gentiles that weren't a part of the religion weren't welcomed? Was this just a first century thing where religious leaders, like if you were considered unclean, you weren't welcome at the table? No, this wasn't just a first century thing. I mean, this happens so often today. Whether you're a church person or you're not a church person, whether you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, we can all agree that this is something that happens. I mean, our culture, the way we are set up, is designed to keep our tables reserved for us. And obviously I'm using a table sort of as a metaphor here, but think about your house. Think about the high fence. Like, you used to have to drive into or get into your driveway in your car and then get out of your car and have no fence and go to your door, and opportunity for people to say hi to. But now, right, you go into your garage oftentimes, and you can get into your property, get into your garage, shut the door, go through the door inside the garage into the house without making contact with anybody out there. Right? The way we are designed, the way that our society and our culture is set up, is to be completely isolated from anybody else that might pose a threat. And what's difficult, what I'm noticing today, it's difficult to maintain relationships with people that have different beliefs than you. Or it's difficult to maintain relationship with those who disagree with you. Because, I mean, we have a cancel culture, right? Where if you disagree with somebody's point of view, or you disagree with somebody's beliefs, or you disagree with somebody's ideologies, you cancel them. Right? You don't have any sort of anything they say from that point on, you're going to disregard. We find it very hard to disagree with people and maintain relationships. And the question is, can we disagree with people and still allow them to sit at our table? Across the board, can we disagree with somebody, have different views, have different values, and still let them sit at our table? Because though we're becoming more diverse, our society is becoming simultaneously more divided, segmented, polarized, segregated, balkanized, and homogeneous. And in the past, in Australia, right, voting patterns were less starkly divided between like the city and the suburbs, or the city and the country, where it was sort of didn't matter where you lived. There was going to be people with some sort of diversity around you. But now it's sort of like split, where if you live in the city, everybody's going to be having the same ideology, the same voting tendencies in the city. And if you're in the country, there's like a separate, completely different worldview where everybody's going to be similar. And what that means is we don't have difference of opinion around us, where everybody around us, our neighbors are like us, our neighbors like us, and we surround ourselves with those types of people. We surround ourselves with those that we don't have these sort of difference in opinions with people that hold, even like, I don't want this to be like a political conversation, but people that have different political views, we don't necessarily rub shoulders with those types of people. And though we're becoming more diverse, we're becoming more segregated and polarized. Next slide, please. And for the most part, like, Christians are really terrible at this. Because think about, I just want you to go back to that moment where you're in the lunchroom, you're in the eating area, and you're trying to find the place to sit. Like, there's this level of fear that we experience. There's this fear of rejection. There's this fear of, what if they don't accept me? There's this fear of, what if I don't belong? And so fear, as adults, drives us into these bubbles. Like, we put ourselves in these subcultures, or we put ourselves in these bubbles where it's a safe place and there's no room for difference of opinion. Because we say that if I'm afraid that I will be swayed, or that I'm wrong, or that I'll become the minority. And so we put ourselves in these bubbles. And so this morning, this message is for Christians. This message is for Christians, but if you're here and you don't consider yourself a Christian, I think you would agree that the world would be better if we all operated differently. The world would be better if we all made room for different people at our tables. And so this morning, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a story. And if you've read the Bible before, you've been in church for a very long time, I think that you probably have heard this story, you've read this story, but maybe you're not a Christian. And the good news is, like, you can continue to be in your bubble. You can continue to close your table off. Like, I don't have any right to tell you how you should live your life, but I think we can be on common ground that if we lived our lives different, and if we do what I'm about to read, what Jesus encourages us to do, that our communities will be better, that our lives will be better, and that Townsville, or your direct community, would just be a better place to be in. So I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to read a story about what happened, and we'll see where we go from there. So, John, I just start with here. Jesus left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now, I don't want to just say, like, the Bible's telling us this. I want us to make this more relational. Because John, who was a follower of Jesus, who was with Jesus for his ministry, he was an eyewitness. He documented these things, and we get to read. They got compiled into what we call the New Testament, and we get to read it. So John tells us that Jesus left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. So he's giving us some context and some geography lessons. If you're unaware of, like, the geography, John is telling us. And it says, now he had to go through Samaria. He had to go through Samaria. And if you are great at geography, you're going, John, no, he did not have to go through Samaria. There are other ways to get to from Judea to Galilee. He didn't have to go through Samaria. In fact, going through Samaria was a lot quicker. Like, it was a shortcut, but there were other ways to get there. And the other route was sort of east of the Jordan River, which most of the time, if Jewish people were traveling from Judea to Galilee, they would avoid Samaria at all cost, because Jews and Samaritans did not like each other. So even though avoiding Samaria would have added a lot of time to their travel, and remember, they don't have cars, they're doing this by foot, and so time is energy, and it's a big deal. But most people would avoid Samaria at all costs and take the long route instead of taking the shortcut. They would normally take the eastern route in order to avoid this location. But Jesus, in his travels, he chose to go right through Samaria in order to reach this people group that in their culture was a despised people group. It was a despised people group of that region. And so it says that Jesus left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria. And I love how Paul describes Jesus. Paul, the description that Paul gives to Jesus, and Paul, he writes like half of your New Testament. So he planted all these churches and he wrote these letters, and those letters are in your New Testament. And he gives this language of Jesus. He says, he is the image of the invisible God. He calls Jesus the image of the invisible God. If you want to know what God is like, watch Jesus. If you want to know who God likes, look at Jesus. If you want to know what God would do, look at Jesus. If you want to know who God would let to sit at his table, look at Jesus. Look at Jesus. He is the image of the invisible God. If you would like to know who God would invite to sit at his table, look at Jesus. See who Jesus would sit with. And the more you look at Jesus, this is great, the more you look at Jesus, if you look at Jesus long enough, you begin to learn how God the Father views all of us. If you look at Jesus long enough, you begin to learn how God the Father views you and how he views me. If you would like to know, if there is any mystery around who God the Father is, look at the person of Jesus. So, he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. So referring to times in the Old Testament, and they didn't call it the Old Testament, but this was like a reference where the readers of this time would understand what this was, where this was. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well, and it was about noon. Why did John include that it was about noon? Because you guys, other than when it's raining, you've been outside in the summer of Townsville at noon. Like, it is hot, right? Most people would. I avoid doing like the lawn work at noon. I want to do it at sunset when things are cooling down. And the reason why John included it was about noon is because nobody would go to the well at noon. It would be completely empty. There would be normally nobody at the well at noon. People would go get their water in the morning when things were cooler. And the only reason somebody would go at noon is because they knew it would be empty. They want to avoid people at all costs. Maybe they're embarrassed by something, like they have a reputation that they're embarrassed by, so they don't want to deal with talking with people. They want to do this just and be completely alone. And they knew that they would be alone because nobody in their right mind would go on that journey to get their water at noon. There would have been a lineup in the morning. Like, that's when all the people would go. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, so the Samaritan woman went at noon when it was hot. She wanted to be alone. Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" And she would have been struck by how awkward this was. And we don't have all the context, and if you've never opened the Bible, you wouldn't have the context of the awkwardness here, but John, who is the author of this book, gives us the context as to why this was awkward. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. It was as if John knew that one day, readers wouldn't have all of the context, wouldn't have all the history between the Jews and the Samaritans. But it's as if Jesus was sitting at his table. It's as if he was sitting at his table and he looks at her, a person who culturally they would never ever actually have a conversation like normal, like Jews and Samaritans, especially a Samaritan woman, a Jewish man and a Samaritan woman, they wouldn't come in contact with one another. And it's as if Jesus is looking at her and saying, "Come here, come sit at my table. You're welcome. I am extending an invitation to you to come and sit with me. Have a seat." And she would have been absolutely shocked because the level of social no-nos that was going on here was staggering. The level of social no-nos that was going, it was just unbelievable. A Jewish man talking to a Samaritan woman? Like a Jewish person wouldn't just talk to a Samaritan person, let alone a man and a woman. And then later on, we're going to find out more about this woman's story, more about her history, that's going to let us know more cultural reasons why this encounter should not have happened. Why it was so radical. And I don't know what your views of Jesus are, how Jesus has been portrayed to you, how Jesus has been represented to you, but I would bet that Jesus, he's different than you think. He's different than you think. He's different than what his followers thought. They had an expectation of who Jesus was, of really who the religious leaders and were saying what the Messiah would be like, and Jesus was nothing like that. He was different than what the religious leaders were expecting. Jesus is different than who we think he is oftentimes. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Okay, so Jesus is clearly changing topics. He's no longer talking about drawing water from a well. He's changing the direction of the conversation. He is letting her know that there is an appetite that all humans are longing for, and I can meet it. There's an appetite that I know you're longing for, and Jesus is saying, I can meet that appetite. But the woman doesn't really pick up the change in conversation, so she took it quite literal. "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water?" How are you going to get this living water out of this well? You don't have anything to draw the water. Don't tell me about getting water. I've come prepared. You don't have what you need to draw the water. And so he explains it to her, and he gives her more detail. Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. Everyone who drinks will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." And throughout his ministry, Jesus would reference this type of thing. And later on, he would say, "I have not come for the healthy. I have come for sick people. I'm not trying to give water to people that don't think they need it. I'm trying to find the thirsty people that know they need a Savior, and I'm trying to let them know that I am here for you. I'm trying to find the people that recognize that they need water, that they are thirsty, not the people that think that their thirst is quenched and that they have it all figured out. No, I am trying to find people that know they need a Savior, and I'm letting them know that I am here for you. I'm trying to let them know that if you're thirsty, if you're open, you can sit at my table. If you're thirsty, and if you recognize that you need a Savior, pull up a seat. You can sit at my table. The God of the universe in flesh says you can sit at my table. And how should the lady respond? How should the lady that Jesus is talking to respond? Maybe with a thank you? That would be nice, right? Some manners, thanks, Jesus, that's great. But she, maybe like some of you, thinks this is an odd encounter because this man seems to be offering something that only God can offer. And she might be thinking, but if that's true, if you really knew who I was, if you knew my past, if you knew what I was going through, if you knew what I did last week, if you know the baggage that comes with me, if you know what I'm thinking about all the time, there is no way you would let me sit at your table, Jesus. You don't know who I am. Because I wouldn't let me sit at my table, and you're offering an extension, an invitation to me. But Jesus says, he looks at her like, I know you. And to you, he says, I know you. I know your doubts. I know you've turned your back on me. I know the skeletons in your closet. I know the addictions. I know the temptation. I know you. I don't know just the church version of you. Like, no, I know you. And I'm extending a seat at my table. But he says to the Samaritan woman, he says, go call your husband and come back. So she's like, oh, if only you knew. And he says, go call your husband and come back. She says, I have no husband. I love this encounter. Jesus says to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. Like, you're spitting facts, but there's more to it than that. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands. And the man like she's getting caught red-handed here, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have said is quite true. Like, it's true you say you have no husband. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you are currently with is not your husband, but you are living with him. So she is like a social outcast. She would be filled with shame, and the woman was ostracized and marked as immoral. An unmarried woman living openly with the 6th in a series of men. This was stunning. And Jesus is like, it's all right. I know you. I know you. I know more than just the version that people see. I know you. And you can come and sit at my table. See, what we try to do as Christians is we try to stack up all of our good in order to earn a seat at the table, don't we? We say, yes, I give, I serve, I go to church, I am giving back to the community, and believe, those are all good things, but that is not what earns you a seat at the table. We do those things once we're at the table, and what earns us the seat at the table is the invitation that's been given to us. But we try to stack up our good. But the thing is, yes, that's all great, but God knows your skeletons. And he extends an invitation to sit, as Jenny would say, you can sit here. You can sit with me. You can sit at my table. In fact, I'd love for you to pull up a seat. You're trying to find where you belong. You're trying to find meaning. You've been running away from the table. You've been running away from the invitation, but please, come and have a seat. There's nothing that I would like more, Jesus would say, than for you to pull up a chair and sit with me at my table. And the woman says, I know that the Messiah called Christ is coming. So she's trying to get out of this conversation. It's feeling a bit awkward for her. And when he comes, he'll explain everything to us. I'm going to go now. I know that there is a Messiah. He'll explain all of this to me. I'm going to go. And Jesus replies, he declares, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. The Messiah, the Christ, the one you said will come, behold, you are speaking to him. What Jesus is doing in this encounter, I'm so glad that John documents this for us, is he is demonstrating how God feels about all people. Not just people who look like you and that like you, but he is demonstrating how God feels about all people, and he shatters our idea about who belongs at our table, who's allowed at our table. He busts it wide open. He just busts it open. Saying it's not just reserved for a few. It's not just reserved for a select few. He's demonstrating who God allows at his table. The woman, then leaving her water jar. So she came to draw water at noon. It's hot, think Townsville in the middle of the day. It is hot. The woman left her jar, what she came to do. She came to get water, but she's so excited that she leaves the jar and went back to the town and said to the people, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. And maybe the people are like, we could have told you those things, but a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? She tells everyone that he knew exactly who I was and the things that I've done. I've never met this man, but he still let me sit at his table. He still offered the invitation. He knew, the Messiah knew all of my baggage, the things that you have made me an outcast for, the things that you've ostracized me for. And he said, come, I will offer you the living water. Jesus is pushing the boundaries and demonstrating who should be allowed to sit at our table. And I think what we need to do, whether you're a Christian or a non-Christian, I think we need to be honest about our tables. Like to think about the metaphorical table, to be honest about your table, and to determine what informs the boundary of your table. What informs who's allowed to sit at your table? It's like when you're sitting on an airplane, and I know I get these looks, right? Somebody comes on with a kid, and you're like praying, please don't let them sit next to me, please don't let them sit next to me. Like, I get those eyes. I don't even know. I know what everyone's thinking when I go on with my boys. It's like, you better be back at the toilets, like as far away from me as possible. But who do you not want to sit with you on a plane? Like, we need to be honest about these things. And like whoever, I'm not just using that kid's example, but whenever somebody walks by you, it's like, please don't sit next to me. Please don't sit next to me. I want to give you another illustration here to think about. There's a book by Richard Beck, and he talks about our moral circles, just as we begin to wrap up here. And I want you to imagine, I think there should be one that says, this is me, Brendan. There should be a first one, or is that the only one? No? Okay. All right, I just want you to imagine that this is you, and this is your moral circle. Do we have that slide, Brendan? It disappeared. Okay. Well, I'll just explain it to you. All right, so you have a circle, your moral circle, and the people that are inside your circle, they are people that, like your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, people that look like you and people that talk like you, or people that are like you, that believe the same things that you believe. And that is typically people that fit in your circle. And has anybody ever waited tables? Anybody? Hands up if you've been a waiter or a server. Wow. And anybody been served by somebody that waits tables? Yeah. Okay. So we're all in the same boat here. And I want you to imagine, I want you to be in the scenario that you have gone to a restaurant and your friend is the server, right? You've gone and your friend is the server, and everything that could go wrong is going wrong, right? You ordered Coke and you got Pepsi. Ugh. You got cold chips. Like your chips were cold. It took like half an hour for you to get. You didn't even get your water. You didn't get what you ordered. You didn't want tomatoes, but they put extra tomatoes on your burger, right? But it's your friend that is waiting. And so what do you say to the friend? You say like, oh, it's fine. No worry. I don't need water. Pepsi is okay, when we all know it's not. You're trying to do what you can to make sure that that person isn't feeling bad, like that it's okay, this has been a really bad experience, but I'm not going to project that onto you. So everything has gone wrong, but it's your friend, it's somebody in your circle that is dying, that is waiting on you, that is serving you, and so you sort of like brush it off like it's no big deal. Now, introduce the next waiter who is a stranger, who you've never met. Again, you're going to dinner with your family. You haven't been out for a long time. Your kids are actually behaving. And you get the same scenario. You get Pepsi instead of Coke. Your chips are cold. It's been half an hour. It's like, and you know, if I was in Canada, I'd be racking up like, okay, the tip is going down and down and down, right? Luckily, we don't have to do too much tipping here, but same scenario. It's a horrible experience. And what do we say to the stranger? Can I speak to your manager? We've been waiting here for so long. This is unbelievable and unacceptable. I am paying for this food, and like I would have a better experience at my house. Like, can I speak to your manager? And the question is, why do we have two different responses, two different behaviors for two different types of people? It's because the one, like the waiter that we wanted to make sure that everything was good for, that's like your mom or your brother or your friend. So like that's your people. But for the stranger, that's like, he has a mom. He's somebody's son. He's somebody's friend. He's somebody's brother. Why do we have two different views, two different responses for two different people? And it's as if, if this is your moral circle, If this is your fishing day, oh, okay. It's like Jesus is saying, you need to expand or blow up your circle. You need to blow up your circle. He's saying, like, would you choose to look at people through a lens that they have been made in the image of God from birth? That God has placed intrinsic value because of whose they are? Would you treat people based on that, about who they belong to? Would you treat people as if that they are sons and daughters of the Most High God? And like I said, this isn't easy for me, but I find if we can be led by curiosity, if we can be led by curiosity of, I've got something to learn from you, like curiosity is what do I have to learn from this group of people? Like if we can be led by curiosity and ask questions and don't go, well, I have it all figured out, I know all the answers. But to recognize that everybody is made in the image of God, that everybody has intrinsic value from the time they were like born into this earth. You know what the amazing thing is, that arrogant people don't ask questions, but curiosity is a practice of humility. Like, I'm not saying like if you're not asking questions, you're arrogant, but arrogant people, they don't ask questions because they assume that they already know everything, that they've already got it figured out, that they don't need to be curious, that they don't need to learn anything because what I know is what is right and nothing is going to change that. Curiosity is a practice of humility, going, what can I learn from you? What can I learn from your experiences? What is it that you value? Curiosity. And you might be thinking, but John, like, when do we confront someone? When do we confront someone about their views? When do we confront somebody about like the things that they're doing or their beliefs? Or when do we confront somebody that when their actions are actually being harmful to others? Well, based off Jesus, it's not about confronting to prove your correctness and to prove their wrongness. Jesus would always confront in a way that is with care and concern. If you need to confront, which sometimes you do, we need to approach it only with care and concern. And to wrap it up, our view of God will be as small as the size of our table. Your view of God will be as small as your size of your table. Your view of God gets bigger when you make room at your table. Your view of God gets bigger when you make room at the table. So, how do you make room at the table? If you were to be honest about your table, who is at your table? Who are you allowing to sit at your table? And who are you being like the people on the bus saying, nope, seat's taken. You can't sit here. When you have compassion for others who aren't in your bubble, you learn something about them and you learn something about yourself. And how do you do that? How do we do that? Well, we're going to talk about that next week as we continue our series, More Than a Story. God, we thank you for today, and I thank you for Jesus. And God, for those of us that find this a challenging message to expand our table, to invite people to sit at the table, people that are different from us, that people that have different values and belief systems, God, pray that you would, first of all, highlight that and give us the courage and the boldness to expand the seats at our table, to expand who we allow to be at our table. So I pray that that would be what we work on this week, that we would take an exact example from Jesus and model how he lived his life. So I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.